When it comes to graphic design, even the slightest bit of shadow or light can elevate your designs from being flat and boring to being something a whole lot more. Hello my friends, Rob here from Button Press Graphics, and today I'm going to be going a little bit more in depth when it comes to lighting and shadows. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, as you can see on screen, I have two images which are exactly the same in nature and shapes. One that has no lighting and shadows at all, and it's just flat base colors with the shapes, and one that has gradients, lighting and shadows. And as you can see, it makes a whole lot more difference. So how does lighting and shadows work? Well, in the example I've got on screen right now, this design here was just three different shapes sat on a normal background. So we have a pink background square, then we have a red square with rounded corners, within that we have a blue circle, and within that we have another green square with rounded corners, but the orientation has been rotated slightly. As you can see now, we have a light source coming from the top left corner, and it's coming all the way down, casting a shadow off all the objects. Now the objects don't look like they're all the same image. Instead, because of the shadows, they now look like they are stacked on top of each other. Throw in a few gradients onto this and an overlay effect with your shadows, and this is what you will come up with. So how do you go about doing it? Well, today I'm going to give you a brief explanation of how they work, and then I'm going to give you a couple of examples that you can put into practice and design yourself. Now, if you look at the graphic that I quickly made, you can see what I mean. Now, the light source can be coming from above an image, and it can also be coming from just one direction. Depending on your design will depend on exactly how you make it work. But at the end of the day, it's up to you because it's your design. Now, as you can see by these yellow circles, I have got the light source. I wanted the light source to be slightly above and then pointing down onto the objects that we're trying to cast shadows on. Now, these little red arrows will show you where it is going to cast a shadow. Light only travels in straight lines after all. But where you can see these green highlights, that is where you will put highlights from the light source, the brighter areas of your composition. Now, this is a side view of it coming from above the object and down. So obviously on the opposite side you will get shadows, and on the side that's closest to the light source you will get the highlights. Now, if you take this bird's eye view, you can see exactly what I mean. The red arrows will signify where the shadow will be cast from, and the green areas will show where the light is hitting first, so the brightest parts of your image. Now, take this for an example. We have the light source coming directly from above down onto this circle. So in order for you to create the illusion of this circle being 3D, you would need to have highlights on the top, a darkness on the bottom, and of course, if you want it to be elevated off the ground, you would need a soft shadow being cast underneath. Now, as it says in this box here, when it comes to the shadows, distance will dictate the depth of that shadow. So for example, because we know this light source is directly above the circle, we are going to get the brightest part of the circle on the top here, which is where I have added a faint blur to give the illusion of light reflecting off the top. When it comes to underneath, we have the darker areas, the areas that the light is not going to be able to get to. This isn't a transparent ball after all, this is a solid ball, almost like a snooker ball. Now when it comes to underneath, one thing to keep in mind is the closer the object is to a surface, the more harsh the shadow will be. So directly underneath in the center of the circle, we get a much darker area here. But the longer the distance between the object and the shadow being cast from it, like this one here, means that it will be softer and softer as it goes out. Now if you look on screen, I have made a very simple shape. All I did was use a grid to create these shapes, and then on top I put some lines going from each corner to each corner using the snapping. Once complete, I used the shape builder tool to get every individual piece. As you can see, they are all separate. But now say we want to add some light and some shadow. Well, the easiest way that I can show you on this is just by blocking in different colors. For example, if I was to add a circle and make it yellow, this can signify where our light source is. All the light will be coming from this point, meaning that everything closest to this point on every individual object will be brighter than the rest. I can show you this on just a very simple 2D image like this one, which looks like a wooden cabinet, and I can change the colors to make it look a whole lot more 3D. Now of course you can go further and add some very intricate details, but for now I'm just going to change the color of each individual shape to show you exactly what I mean. So when it comes to the color of each of these shapes, let's go with the outside edge first. This object and this one will have the light hitting it straight away. There is nothing blocking the path of the light, so these will be the brightest areas. Now I'm not going to go through the fill and stroke menu, I'm just going to use the color swatches down here at the bottom. I'm going to use this section here. So because we know these are going to be the lightest areas, we're going to select them and then have them looking like this. Now for this method you will need around 3 colors just to give the illusion of depth, but you can go further and give some variation within that. The more colors you use, the better the effect. But this is just a quick demonstration, so I'm going to go through all of the corners that are on the top and the left hand side of each section, and I'm going to change the color to match this one, here. And now we have our highlights. These are the lightest parts of the image. Now when it comes to the darkest areas, we are going to take the opposite sides. That means these two are going to be much darker. So let's select something like this. And I'm going to go through exactly the same way and do the same thing. And now as you can see, we have a much better look. Now when it comes to these raised parts in the center, and even that one there that goes in between all of the shapes, you can simply go further by adding gradients, going from light in the top left corner nearest to the light source and make it slightly darker when it comes to the bottom right. And now that we are finished, I'm going to select over everything by clicking and dragging a box over all of the image with my select tool, and then I'm going to go to the stroke paint and turn off all the strokes. And now if we zoom out a little bit, as you can see, it now looks almost 3D. You can even go further to this and take all of the highlighted areas and then put a gradient on them, along with all of the darkened areas, and put a gradient on them too. Now before we continue into the rest of the video, I just wanted to bring you back to the Creative Corner. Today we have a picture from SKM Riffy, one of the viewers, and they have sent me quite a few pictures, and I have to say, when it comes to abstract art like this, he is head and shoulders above everyone else. Then when you add to the fact that he only uses Microsoft PowerPoint and Publisher, that takes this art to a whole new level. Great job as usual, my friend. Now if you want to send me your art, then please by all means send them in. You can find all the information you need at the end of this video or in the description down below. Now back to the video. So now how about I show you how I did the circle into a 3D ball. Well, it is a very simple method in order to create a 3D sphere. First, you create a circle holding Shift and Control to make sure it is perfectly circular. Once you do, choose your color. You want to make this a mid-range color, not too dark, not too bright. Now I'm going to create another little circle just up here, just to signify where the light source is coming from. So I'll turn that yellow, and this is where the light source is going to come from. But it would also work if you move the circle this way. As long as you cast all the shadows over this side, it would work, and vice versa. If you had the light source here, you could cast the shadow this way. In fact, so it is a little bit different from the one that I showed at the beginning of the video. I will do exactly that. I will make the light source around here. This means that the light source is going to be casting a shadow which is underneath and slightly to the left, and the highlight is going to be slightly over to the right. Now in order to begin this, we are going to select the main circle and we're going to add a radial gradient. So within the fill and stroke menu, we're going to select this option here, which is radial gradient. And this works in exactly the same way as a linear gradient, with the center being the node to begin, and the outside nodes here are going to be where it ends. Now the only difference between the linear gradient and the circular gradient is these two nodes here will signify the shape of a radial gradient. So if I bring this down, as you can see, it's now more oblong. The center is going to have a solid color, while the outside is going to be completely opaque by default. So we're going to come to the alpha channel and we're going to slide it all the way up. And then while we've still got this one selected, I'm going to lower it so it's very dark. Something that looks like this. And now I'm going to select the start point and bring it closer to where the light source is. So I'm going to bring it up like so. Now what I am looking for is to get this very dark area on the opposite side. This is going to give the illusion of shadow on the other side of the ball from where the light source is. You can go further and make it even brighter at this point, which is what I'm going to do next. Along this bar, this is how quickly your gradient will change from one color to another. I'm going to get the start point, bring it over, And then I'm going to double click near the end of the bar and bring it as far to the left as I can. Now, as you can see, the values are all set at 100. I'm going to take the saturation and bring it down. Not a lot, just enough so it is noticeable. And then you can pick and choose where you place it and where you want the shadow to be. If you want to have it more up like this, but then this shadow becomes too big, this is where these areas will come into play. You can now play around with the shape and get something that looks a whole lot more organic. And there we go. We now have a ball that looks kind of basic, but it does the trick very well. Now we're going to do the highlights and the shadows. Now when it comes to the highlights or the shadows, it is a very simple method. You do not need to be exact because we will be blurring it. So I'm going to come back to the circle and ellipses tool, and I am going to create a circle. Then using the select tool, I am going to squash it ever so slightly and click it again to get the rotation handles so I can rotate it. Again, we want this along the edge of the main circle, but closest to the light source. So somewhere around here. And I am also going to change this so it's white. Now with that done, I'm going to turn the blur up. And I'm going to reduce the opacity. And then just play around with it until you get it in a place that you think looks good. For me, around there would be looking perfect. And now I'm going to cast a shadow. Again, I'm just going to use another circle. Now when it comes to the shadow, you want it to be slightly bigger than the object that's casting the shadow. So as you can see, this is not big enough yet, so I'm just going to hold shift while I scale the side handles to get it a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to place it where I think the shadow should be. So as you can see, the line comes down, causes a reflection here, keeps going until it gets down here. And I think around there is about right. So what I'm going to do now is just do exactly what I did with the ball. I'm going to add a radial gradient. The distance will dictate the strength of the shadow. As you can tell, when the line comes from here through the center, the darkness is going to be around here. Then you can play around with the size and the placement until you get something that you think looks good and natural. And you can also play with the blur on this as well. Even though you are using a gradient, you can still blur it to give a very soft light. Something that looks a little bit like that. And just like that, you now have a globe and not just a standard circle. So that's how you go about using light and shadow to elevate your designs. Did you know that you can become a member of the Button Press Graphics YouTube channel? Well, now you do. You will get a lot of added benefits and you will directly support the channel, enabling me to make much better content in the future. Also, you can send in your artwork into the Creative Corner. This is a regular section where I will showcase your work in a future video. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell, and I will see you next time.